Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. Welcome to today's grain market blast. It is, well, I don't quite know how, but it appears to be Monday, the 2nd of June. I don't know where May went. But as ever, you join myself and the glamorous with a capital G, Angie Setzer, where Angie will be providing us with a rapid roundup of the latest pricing flows and market moving news in agricultural markets. But before she does, I'll get the legals out the way so I don't get the Rozzers, the old bill, that's kind of UK slang for the police, on my back. So let's get them out of the way. So as usual, nothing discussed on the Spaces session constitutes trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ, myself, Ryan Paisley, or the glamorous capital G, Angie Setzer. How are you, my darling?
I am tremendous.
Tremendous, capital T.
Terrific. No, I'm not
Awesome.
really. I was trying to find the right Elmo snorting cocaine gift to describe what it takes to get me started each Monday now in these conditions. But I couldn't find one. So here we are. But I'm ready to rock and roll. So big changes over the weekend. You want to just dive right into the first bullet point? You think we should? Shall we?
Go for it. Yeah.
All right. Well, Russia's Pearl Harbor ? Is bullet point number 1. Simply because we had a huge escalation over the weekend in the situation between Russia and Ukraine. I was just talking to a customer of mine, about wheat and kind of, what our targets are and what's going to happen. Cause, the clock is ticking. We can hear it, ticking ever so loudly now because we're about 4 weeks away from wheat harvest and yada, yada, yada. But, we were talking about what you saw over the weekend with Ukraine. Basically kind of, I don't even know if this sets a scary precedent to a certain extent, or it at least opens the eyes of the world. For those of you that, weren't, watching, good for you also, by the way, like, yay. But if this is all news to you, then teach me your ways. But anyway, Ukraine basically launched 4 separate attacks on, Russian, airfields, Russian Air Force bases, the furthest of which being 2,500 miles inland in Russian territory. And so basically, these were Russian driven vehicles. They were container trucks or whatever, that once they got near their destination, remote power, I don't know, I picture Transformers in my head. All of a sudden like they just turned
The worst thing is I actually did the arm movements for a
right,
robot.
that's what
No one can
I
see
saw
me.
it. I saw it in my head, but, that's what you have, like, you basically have lost a third of, that's the estimate currently of Russia's long range missile, bomber, planes. That's what they targeted. Cost $7 billion is the current estimate. And really, that is massive because it just gives Russia this huge black eye. How does Putin receive this? How does he go and negotiate? You know what I mean? And not really kind of come back with a because this is huge. This is a huge kick in the box for Russia, you could say. But not only that, not only did you have this happen and this sort of change in everything to a certain extent, you also had 2 very important logistical, routes destroyed. 2 rail bridges blew up. Ukraine has not taken credit for this yet, but it was into Crimea for one and into Zaza, or whatever, for the other one. And so both of those also, kind of destroyed very critical infrastructure. And the thing that this opens up to me or makes me wonder, is we'd always kind of seen this sort of, you can't touch these things. Russia has kind of allowed the continuation of exports out of Ukraine of grain and some of these other things. We've obviously seen Russia continue to export grain and some of these other things. And so, does this open the door to infrastructure attacks that we hadn't seen before? Does the situation boil into whatever? And so it's going to be interesting. We did see Russia and Ukraine hold peace talks today. I'm waiting. I've been refreshing, trying to get, what was the updated, terms of peace from Russia, because we haven't seen those yet. Basically Russia's kind of said the same thing over and over and over again. This second meeting in Istanbul lasted for about an hour, which is either a great sign or a really bad sign. And I would probably lean towards the latter after the weekend.
One thing I will say is literally 2 seconds ago, I just saw funny enough, we posted it, the Royal Week. So my minions have posted it on our account from Zelensky. Apparently he's just announced that Ukraine and Russia are preparing a new exchange of prisoners of war.
Yes. They have children that they're also working to exchange to, which is really...
just now Zelensky or Ukraine has provided Russia with a list of children's names that have been abducted by the Russians, and hopefully they get back to their families at some point as well. So
Yeah.
that'd be very good. But it
Yeah.
just shows you that even though we have had this massive kind of change in warfare almost over the weekend, at least they are still in dialogue. It's not like
Yes.
this has happened and the walls have gone up and no one's talking to each other anymore, because that would be pretty scary if that did happen.
And to
But at
have the
least,
POW exchange and some of these other things
yeah,
is a very positive sign, especially with the kids. There's been reports that, you know, there'd been just basically attacks on like orphanages and it's just, yeah. And anyway,
yeah.
and so we'll see, you know, kind of how this all plays out. But I definitely think that the market, you know, I laugh. 3 years ago, we'd been limit up. Across, like, wheat had been limited up, you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
everyone had been
That.
shitting their pants over this, and now we're just like, oh, we don't need them anyway. What? Between the two of them, 60 million metric ton of wheat? Who gives a crap? You know what I mean? And like, that's just kind of how the market, but we'll see. We're up 12 cents this morning. We'll see if that's a function of that or not. And we'll get a look at what Russia's second round of demands are. Now, I think Russia's second round of demands will likely have a huge impact on whether Trump says 2 more weeks or not, or if we unleash old Lindsey Graham on him. That's how Lindsey will do it. That's him. That's going for the ankles. So we'll see how that plays out. That's, you know, that's kind of a big factor there that we'll be watching. Obviously we have trade updates. We've seen an escalation, over the weekend there as well. Cause why the hell not? Let's just party, everybody.
Yeah.
You obviously saw Trump there on Friday. No more Mr. Nice Guy. You know, I'm not going to talk about it. Oh, I feel like Michael Brown should have listened. I feel like I just struck on Michael really quickly. But anyway, he's not going to talk about it. You know, he's just kind of frustrated. He's not going to be Mr. Nice Guy. He says China is not following through. Really, it looks like they're, pointing towards their, lack of flow of critical minerals. And so that's the thing that the U.S. is kind of a little ticked about. And then China's like, oh, well, you know, your behavior towards our students has been super great as of late as well. You know, and you've also continued while we're supposedly negotiating to crack down on certain chip supplies and things like that. And so both sides are kind of like, you're not even trying at this point. And so really everyone is saying that Xi and Trump should have a conversation this week. I am not holding my breath, though it'd be a good sign if they did. But it's definitely not going to be something that's going to, you know, even if they did, I don't know if it'd get very far. I feel like that situation needs to escalate before it resolves. Which maybe it already has. Who knows? EU also super importante, considering Trump said he was going to double steel and aluminum tariffs. You know, and so that kind of came out of left field again. You know, probably a little bit of a poke from Friday. You know, Thursday afternoon you had the taco. And so for anyone that's, not really sure where the joke is coming from, taco is Trump always chickens out. An economist or an analyst kind of said it, and it was all kind of tongue in cheek until someone told the teacher. And so Thursday afternoon, basically a reporter was like, how do you feel about this? And he was obviously not impressed. And so, you know, very quickly we saw the China, threat on Friday, and then the EU threat on, it wasn't an EU threat, but it does hit the EU, the steel and aluminum tariff increase. Makes the EU a little, pissy, if you will, about it.
Well, do you know what? Just a bit more colour on this, because funny enough, I flagged this with Michael. I think it was on Friday when we did our morning podcast. One of the key things that the UK, obviously the UK is not the EU, we voted out. One of the key things that the UK are going to Washington on is the car industry and our steel industry. And our steel industry is on its knees, let's be honest. So the idea was that the UK government were going to seek some kind of like some leniency on UK imports into the US. And I said at the time, I was like, this isn't going to happen, because the steel industry is one of the key pillars that, well, one of the manufacturing pillars that industrial pillars that Trump is kind of leaning on, especially with the Nippon Steel deal. Is it? Won't it? Will it? That kind of thing. So I think, I can completely understand why Trump is applying the steel tariffs, and this is why I think anyone in the UK expecting the UK to get a good deal on steel are going to be severely disappointed, because Trump's got no interest in helping anyone else's steel industry bar his own domestic one.
Yes, yeah, and that's it. I don't even know where to start on that. It's just the hardest part is, can you imagine, trying to, I look at it as a trader, the negotiation side of things. I look at it as a trader, and like every time it's like, okay, so you're looking for grade 2 corn delivered June through July at this basis, yada, yada, yada. You want these payment terms, blah, blah, blah. And then every time you go back and are like, okay, we can make that happen, the other person's like, oh, I think I want, and I always, like, it's just one of those things where it's like, it just doesn't work well. Like, eventually people get frustrated and they tend to walk away. Obviously, that's not something that you can necessarily do in this instance. So we'll see how it all plays out as we go forward. But we still have a good amount of negotiations happening. Japan looks like they're going to be working on doing something, with the administration. They're coming back to town. You've got, several different little meetings here or there. Germany, their chancellor's coming into town. Also interesting, I wanted to ask you, kind of off topic, but Poland's election,
Oh
does
yeah,
that, because Poland's one of the fastest growing economies in the EU,
yeah.
very pro-Trump, that potentially could, kind of
Well,
change the
this is
dynamic
it.
there
Yeah.
too.
So there's been a bit of an upset. It was like the
Yeah.
underdog kind of came through and won. I think looking at Polymarket before the results started coming in, I think the guy that ended up winning, who is a conservative, he was only given a 20% chance
Yeah.
coming into like the final day. And he is, they are quite, well, his party are quite anti-EU,
Mm-hmm.
pro-Trump, pro kind of anti-immigration, should I say? It's probably the easiest way to say it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be an interesting dynamic, and again, it's another thing that the EU could do without.
And a lot of that was
Yeah.
probably driven, like, you could argue that, Poland being forced to take in a lot of Ukraine's grain exports really hurt their farmers
Okay.
in a big
Yeah.
way.
Oh yeah, all
And
these
so
things
if you
happen.
look
All
at
these
it,
things add
yeah,
up. Yeah, definitely.
the rule though really went toward, so it's just interesting how geopolitics affect elections that affect the behavior
Yeah.
of the country in the world, and all of these things matter because Poland is, a decent agricultural, provider and buyer
Yeah.
out of, the EU. So, this is something, lots of things to be paying attention to in trade and relationships and all of that, happy horse stuff. Weather-wise, it doesn't look like anyone has any concerns at all. Like, you're gonna read about, conditions, you're gonna see cool and wet weather. Everyone assumes that cool and wet weather, is what you want to see. And honestly, like, the cliche in farming is a dry year will scare you, a wet year will kill you. And I can say that in my experience, the wet years are the worst years. Just, I'm in Michigan, so we've had our fair share of years that are exceptionally moist. And in the Eastern Corn Belt here, you could say that. One of those things I'll be watching too as we try to roll forward with wheat harvest is just what that has meant for falling numbers, vomitoxin, some worries over fusarium and things like that, which creates vomitoxin potentially and makes wheat less milling quality centric and can create a story. So there's a lot of things weather-wise to be paying attention to, but nothing anyone's freaking out about at this juncture. Otherwise, we'll just be watching demand as we move ahead. We'll get export inspections this morning. We'll want to see a continuation of strong corn shipments, which I think we will. The more corn we ship, the less people can say we'll cancel. So, we might as well, we'll be paying attention to that. Probably see strong wheat shipments again. And then, yeah, we'll really just be watching how this all plays out with, Russia and Ukraine, that sort of situation, whether there's no catalyst there. But when it comes to the geopolitical realm and some of these other things, would you want to be sitting near record short as a speculator in wheat when we have a potential big escalation, between Russia
Probably
and
not.
Ukraine? I wouldn't want to, but, I don't know. So yeah, that's about it. That's about where we're sitting at this point in time. Just lots of things to be watching, most of which feels geopolitical. Oh, Iran said no to the US thing, and that's
Yeah.
huge because Israel has threatened to go on their own and bomb
Yes.
Iran's nuclear site. So watch that, you guys. Like, I know in grains we don't tend to focus, like a lot of times it's just, the USDA says this is the supply and demand. Okay, cool. But your balance sheet is one thing. Your ability to move grain, your ability to see demand, your ability to pay for grain, all of these things are tied so much to the geopolitical realm and, all of these other things. And so lots to be watching there, that could have big influences on where we head worldwide. And so yeah, yeehaw, giddy up, happy Monday.
Awesome. Well, Angie, as usual, thank you so much. Listeners, as always, I know we always say it, but we really do appreciate you. Yeah, wonderful. Whatever you're doing today, stay safe, keep it tight, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Much love.
Have a good one, guys.